Hello. In this tutorial, I will be explaining how to use a rebuilder tool that I have made. The main purpose of the tool is to make modding easier by getting rid of having to fetch load lists as well as move entries around in chunks, because that's what we used to do for a long time. And fetching load lists basically works the same as fetching draw lists, which I've explained, but you also have to load in advance, and also the game can only load a specific amount of stuff. The levels are made up of chunks or pages, and there is only a set amount of chunks or pages that the level or the game can load simultaneously. Now for Crash 2, this number is usually 21. This only includes normal chunks. It can load 8 texture chunks, 4 sound chunks, and 4 wavebank or instrument chunks, and 21 or 20 normal chunks. So the way the rebuilder works is there is one input file which is edited. The input file is this NSF or a copy of it, and then the rebuilder creates a different file each time you have changed something and you wanna play the level, or you wanna just have a proper copy of the level that doesn't lag and has everything loaded the way it should be loaded. Now for that we will need several files, because the things that are loaded by specific things or at specific times aren't hard-coded by the rebuilder, and that is because it isn't always the same what's loaded by a specific type or subtype. For example, if you want to mod something, we often change type of something or we add new things. So for the reason, these files have to be provided by the user. There are several files. There are many arguments for the rebuilder that you are asked in the console, and I will go over all of them. So since there are several files, it is usually more convenient to create a new folder for the rebuild files, where we can store all the files. For example, here's a level that we've been working on, and as you can see, there is the level itself which we edit, and it doesn't have a normal name. You can see it has copy at the end, so these files cannot be run by the game. And then there are several input files. There is the permaloaded list. The permaloaded list is a text file which contains a list of all things that should be loaded in the level period. This includes things like Crash's animations, display or HUD code, code for crates, and other things that either cannot be tied to anything else reasonably, or simply it's easier to load it all the time because it's pretty much used all the time. Then there's a dependency list. This dependency list is for letting the rebuilder know what animations or other things load near a specific object type and subtype. I will open this, and you can see that near object type 34, subtype 0, which is a TNT, we load the TNT animations, and we load the crash death angel animation. You might have noticed that there aren't any models here, and that is because since Crash 2 has model references in the animations, the model gets parsed from the animation automatically. Also, there are no GUL entries, since type and object type and GUL type is what ties an object to its code entry. We can, and it is done, that the rebuilder just loads the GUL entry automatically. So near, I don't know, 44, it loads its parent code entry, which is a custom one in this case. So what I will be doing is I will be going from scratch, because that's what you do when you set up a level rebuild kind of situation. You will not be recreating these files all the time. You will most likely create them once, and in cases you add something new, you will add the new things into these files. So I will create a new folder in here. I'll make it S4 so that it is invisible to the game in case we build this entire folder. And we will add snowbiz rebuild, and we will copy these files into the S4 folder so that when we try to open content of this file in CrashEdit, you will be able to run the level in CrashEdit, because when you have a level here, it will be looking for the exe, for the game exe here. So we will give it to it. So I'm gonna grab snowbiz. Just gonna copy it. Gonna put it here. And we will be adding some stuff quickly so that the game lags. So there's something to demonstrate that it has been fixed. And how to do it? I will try to do it as quickly as possible. So I'm just gonna clone OG. OG's crates, and I'll add a new porcupine here, I suppose. No, I don't remember the porcupine arguments. This will be porcupine, and we'll go look for porcupine and write its stuff down. It has type 27.1 and it has arguments 0 to 100, 0, 6, 0, 1, 0, minus 1000, 0, 0, 0, 0. So I'll be just applying these arguments to the object so that we have a porcupine here. 1 for is minus 1000, and then it's just zeros. We'll probably give it some path real quick. Okay, immediately there is an issue. This chunk its contents have become too large for the chunk because we added a porcupine. So in order to fix it, we would normally have to move everything around and make sure that not too many things are loaded all the time, we can just move this here, and we won't be touching any load lists or anything. Now you will still have to patch draw lists. Draw lists aren't done automatically, so draw lists are to be done by the user. And you probably, I think it lagged. So this porcupine, I'm gonna restart again and pay attention to the console. When we came out of the spawn a little bit, there was a lag. You see there's the entry request for porc-c, which is the porcupine's code, and then there's chunk load 55. And if we go into chunk 55, we notice that it has the porcupine animations, which weren't loaded in advance. And we will be adding probably one more thing to make it lag a bit more. Where am I going? I'm going in here. Now I don't expect nitros to be loaded here. So hopefully nitro will make it lag. Nitro is 3418. There's 3 arguments. We'll just put the nitro here. So I'm still just making some changes to the level. So when the level is rebuilt, it will be possible to see the changes. So there was a 1 lag, and there was another lag, and that lag was for the nitro. Now, I would like to make my PC not lag, because it's hard to notice lags with such bad frame rate. Okay, maybe I can't. I just have too much stuff running. So I'm gonna grab this program, cache to export, and put it in my folder. And where you get that from is from here, from Remake 19, cache to export releases. Grab this one. If it doesn't work, grab the one before. This one has multi-threading, and sometimes there's a missing DLL error message. It happened to someone on Windows 11. So there are multiple ways to set up rebuilding, because you will essentially have 2 files or 2 levels. You will have the working version and the rebuild version. Working is the one that you won't have to upkeep. You will just have stuff there, maybe even in some logical way, so that you can make sense of the level structure. And you can but don't have to ever run that version. And then there will be the rebuild version, which is the one that you will be actually playing. And if you go into legendary builds, have a look at JetRex. We can see that there's a copy, and then there's a regular file. So this is the working copy, and this is the rebuild. And in this situation, we can't run this file. It just, if we open it, it won't let us because it doesn't have a good name. But then we have another level where we use 2 IDs. 1F is the rebuild. You can see it's smaller, it's being packed better, and there are no empty chunks. And then there's 24. And 24 is the working version, but 24 is still playable because it has a sufficient ID and the load lists are somewhat upkept. So there are 2 choices that I know about. Either you have a different ID for the working and you have a proper ID for the rebuild, or you just have a random name for the working copy. So we will be changing this one's ID to to 12 or 21. And we also have to patch NSD because level ID is in here, otherwise it will just not work. We have changed the ID. We'll open the level. We will treat this as the working copy, and we should be still able to run the level, but it won't behave entirely correctly. Okay, there's one thing. So there's specific behavior that is coded for specific levels. So I don't remember what level 21 is. 21 is plant food. So it's probably looking for a specific animation, and it's just getting a placeholder name. So we'll be using a different ID. I think we'll use 13, honestly. 13 is called hard crash. Oops. So we have renamed it to 13, and we have changed its ID to 13. And now it should work. Zombies rebuilt NSD. So the level works now. The game thinks it's called hard crash because we changed the ID, but this isn't. This will be the working copy, the one that we don't patch load lists in and that we don't patch the structure in. We will just make changes to it. We will change placement, add new stuff, and so on and so on. So we will be opening crash to export. If you type help, it's got a bunch of stuff, but we'll be using only rebuild. Now at first it wants the NSF of the rebuild file, 13. It wants to know the ID of the rebuild one, which will be 11. Make sure that you don't override your file, because if I were to type 13 right now, it would just wipe my file, I think, or it wouldn't work because it's trying to open an open file already. A secondary save folder, we don't need that now. Remake load lists. We do want to remake load lists. Remaking load lists is what makes the level not lag anymore. Because by remaking load lists, using the input files, we will make sure that around everything, around all the objects and all the areas, everything that has to be loaded will be loaded. So we will remake. Okay, so now we've got a bunch of merge methods. Merge methods is it is a bit hard to decide which entry goes into which chunk, because the way entries are put into chunks has an effect on how many things are loaded everywhere. So I have tried several methods and I still kept them in because they can be used, but you should probably only use 0 and 4, and if it works for you, 5. 5 has multi-threading. I'll be using 5 because it's faster than 4, but otherwise it's the same as 4. So if it doesn't work for you, you can just use 4. The way 4 works is it gets an approximate for how the entries should be packed into chunks, but this approximate is deterministic and sometimes it isn't good. So there's some randomness put on it, and it is just run many times, and it just gives you the best one or a sufficient one. So I will be picking 5. It doesn't really matter now. Now you can pick spawn. We will be likely going for 0A, which is the regular spawn. It gives you all the spawns or the Vili objects, which is 0, 0, and all the checkpoints as spawns in case you wanna debug, or you wanna just spawn somewhere else because you're working on a segment. So you don't have to put a Vili there. You can just have a checkpoint there that you likely have anyway, and you can just spawn on that checkpoint. So we will be spawning on the regular, and now it wants a file with perma-loaded entries. So we'll have to create a new perma-loaded entry file, which is just a text file. Rename perma list. And what perma list contains is just all the entries that should be loaded permanently. But it doesn't include sounds because sounds are already loaded permanently. I just hard-coded it. And it doesn't include waveband chunks, and it shouldn't really include texture chunks, but you can do it. But it's not necessary. So the only stuff that you will be perma-loading most likely is code entries, GUI entries, and animations, and maybe some demo entry or VCMX entry, which is just specific collision that is used in some levels. So the way I usually do it is I just go through all the things and I remember whether they should be perma-loaded or not. So shad C is just shadow, while EC is additional code entry for the main code entry. While EC doesn't have to be loaded permanently, actually. It only has to be loaded near ice. So we will not be loading it. But it is very small, so we can actually load it anyway. Then we have box C, which is boxes. Now, it is probably a bit confusing how I know which things are perma-loaded or not and how to figure them out. You just sort of get used to it because these are entries that are in most levels. They are in all levels and they are almost always loaded. For example, disp C controls HUD, vil C controls cache, box C controls crates, shad C controls shadows, part C controls particles, but also elevators. Doc C controls the mask. Fruit C controls pickup objects, which is fruit. Lives, but also gems. Warp C is for warp out and for warp gates, so we don't have to perma-load that. Porc C is porcupine. Smash C is for smashers, but also icicles, so we don't have to perma-load that. Plat C is for platforms. We don't have to perma-load that. So we'll go through animations now one by one. We don't have to perma-load this. We don't have to perma-load this. We don't have to perma-load this. And we just have to go through all of these and decide whether we want to perma-load this. We don't have to perma-load this, but it's probably easier. You usually want to perma-load as little as possible, because if you perma-load too many things, there will just be too many things, unnecessary things loaded everywhere. But there are some small things like this crate. It barely takes up any space, so I just decided to perma-load it anyway. Shadow V, which is the shadow. CCWV, W2V, and we just sort of have to go one by one and decide whether we want to perma-load it. Now the first couple times will be a bit difficult because you won't be accustomed to the entries and you won't know whether they are perma-loaded or not. But you will be able to figure it out using the emulator, because the emulator, when the game lags, it will, in the console, it tells you which chunk has been just loaded by the lag, or which chunk it was loading and didn't have loaded. And so by looking at the contents of that file, you will be able to most likely deduce which one you should have loaded. Now, this is a bit tedious, but you most likely will be doing this only once. Maybe you will be making some small tweaks. You will decide that you don't have to permaload the fruit crates animation and model. We'll be loading this by something else. Now, this is the hot crate. I didn't want to open Xeber. Cache J CE20V. I think I'm just gonna permaload this gem. These have to be permaloaded because they are in the pause menu. Live crates, we can just permaload it because it's very small. And crash is just body slam. S3V, S4V, CFS5V, crash 20V, crystal 1V, checkpoint. We're not gonna permaload checkpoint, I think. Checkpoint is a bit big. We won't be permaloading it. Cache crawl. Cache witch doctor. Or victory dance? I don't know. CRS1V. Cache ice. These are all ice animations, so we won't be permaloading those. Crash def fall, crash jump up. I think this is L. This is box explosion. We won't be permaloading this. We won't be permaloading this. We will be permaloading base animation. So the animation uses a specific model, and this model is automatically loaded because it just reads the model reference from the animation, and you don't have to type all the animations. Okay, now we have to get back where we were. Then crash walk, crash def animation, crash jump, I don't know, flip, crash jump high, crash jump landing or low, landing. Okay, we don't have to permaload this, 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 or this, or this, or this, or smasher, or icicle, or crash smashed, or nitro, or the nitro boom. We want to permaload Death Angel because I just permaload Death Angel. We don't want to permaload this. This is used on spawn, I think. This is used on spawn and respawn. This is used on respawn and spawn. This is used by warp out. This is idle animation, so this should be permaloaded, or has to be. Another idle animation. This is just a fire animation, and it is usually permaloaded, even though I don't know whether it's even used in Snowbiz ever. crash explosion, and we're at the end. So we have the permalist. Now it wants a list with type, subtype dependencies. I have shown what it looks like, and we will be creating a similar one. So you don't have to remember what everything is in your level. So at first you can just create an empty one and feed it the empty one. Collision dependencies. Collision dependencies are used for loading something when there's specific collision around an area. So, for example, ice. I don't know, OH. There's ice in this area, and we don't want to permaload all the ice animations all the time. We want to load it only near this collision, and also a specific object that behaves like ice, but isn't ice. It is called ice slide. And it is just used on slopes. So, as you can see, there's no collision, there's just an object. But we'll go back to OE, and we'll create a new collision list. And we press C, and I don't know whether you can tell, but 00E3 is the ice collision. So in the collision list, we will just type 00E3, followed by all the entries that we want to load near ice, which will be animations. These we want to load crash ice 20, crash ice 30 and 60, crash ice 30, crash ice 60. We could have also just permaloaded these. I think they are permaloaded in this level because they are in chunks with other permaloaded stuff. But I'm using this mostly as a demonstration of the collision list because it can be useful. Some levels that we have use these, that's why these functionalities are there. So we have all the ice animations, and this is the collision list. Let me think what uses collision list. I think 3 level uses collision list. So we can see that it's loading near collision 35, which is water, and it's loading some water animations. So we have the collision list, but as you can see, it says that assumes false is not necessary if path is invalid, so not everyone uses this. All levels must use permaloaded and type subtype dependency list, but collision and music, which we'll get to now, aren't necessary. But we will be using the collision one for demonstration. Now it wants music entry dependencies, and it's very similar to collision dependency. The way it works is near specific music entries, it just loads all the entries that you feed it. So when there's entry SN, or when there's music entry used by a zone, each zone has a music entry reference in its header, which decides which music entry is loaded, it's playing, and you can just basically make it so in any zone that uses this music entry, you load specific things, and we use it in one level, I think. it wouldn't work much without it. But we will be having this one. We won't be using this one. You can just type X. Now we have been told a bunch of stuff doesn't have a dependency list, and this is because the dependency list we have, I don't have it open. The dependency list that we have is empty, and we'll be creating something like this. So the purpose of all this is just so you can find the stuff easier and find out what's loaded near it. And it just gives you the ID as well, so you don't have to just look for it. So 0, 0, which is, as it says, really, which is spawn. And we will just be loading some of the stuff that I know is loaded near it. So this animation and these animations, I don't think we actually have to load this one. No, we don't have to load this one. We only have to load these three. Then we will go to, we have this. Now type just ID 12. We can just go to ID 12 and object gate bottom. So these are the warp gate. So near object 17, 17, we will be loading warp gate and also this, because I can't tell them apart. One of these is for at the end and one of them is at the beginning, but I can't tell them apart, so I just load all the animations near both of them, which isn't optimal, but it doesn't really matter. So we don't have this anymore. We have ID 13, which is 24.0, which is, I think, seal. Yes, it's a seal. So we just have 24.0, and we look for all the animations. The animation is this one, EV, SE2, EV. We don't have to load CLC, it's code entry, because this code entry has type 24, and since this is object 24, it automatically loads this cool entry. So there seem to be no more seal animations, and we have that out of the way. Now we have 25.0, which should be the penguin. And it's a penguin, and we just look for all the penguin animations. And this is the walking penguin, and I think it spins sometimes. So we will be needing those animations near this kind of penguin. It walks. Now this is the one that slides, and this one at the beginning doesn't slide. This is the other shake animation thingy, and this is the other slide animation, so we don't need that near this one. 34.6, which is the fruit crate, or like you can just go to ID 15 and we'll tell you it's the fruit crate, and the fruit crate is PF10V. Also there's 34.2, which is the normal crate, which is V and 10V. Now they are perma-loaded, but you can also just put them in this list. It's probably easier. 3415 should be the spring crate, the iron one. So that's BS20. Yes, it's BS20. 340 is TNT. ID 22. And it's the TNT, and TNT uses 4 animations. So we add all of those into the list. PT 40B. We don't have these anymore. Now, these types are out of order because the program just lists them in the order they were found. At the end, you'll be able to just reorder this so that it's in some order, so it's not chaotic. But I'm just going one by one, and we'll order it at the end. And this is the BP and B, the pickup crate. Now this format, this is just how it has to be, because it's a C program and it's just reading this and parsing this. So you can't have a comma at the end, and you have to have a comma between these. So please make sure your format is correct, otherwise it's gonna get confused. 34.4 is a checkpoint, so it's BC10V. I think it's capital C. Yes, it is. 34.4. I don't remember what 27.1 is, so we will just look for ID 505, which should be told here, and it's a porcupine, right? 27.01, and we will look for all the porcupine animations. I don't remember how many it uses. I think 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. $25.2. So ID 28. I think that was the diving penguin. 25.02. I can't see my keyboard because it's dark. It's penguin puff. Oh, actually it's penguin puff. No, but it's the diving one. It's just called penguin puff. So it's the diving one, and it should only use these animations. P3HV, P4HV. $34.18 is the nitro, PN10V, and 9.6 is the elevator. And the elevator is, this is the base one, L1EV. 9.6, 9.32 is the catch elevator. If you go to ID 150, you'll see it's the catch in here. So it uses L1EV, but also there's bonus catch. And bonus catch uses the same subtype. This is not the bonus sketch. This is another sketch, and here's the bonus sketch, and it uses the same subtype, but using the arguments it can use a different animation, so we have to load that one as well. And here's this kind of object. 34.9 should be doctor crate, and let's BD then be 27.0. Hello, typing hard. Okay, it is also a porcupine, so you can just copy this. It probably just behaves differently. Now we have this thing, which is ID, come on, ID 76, which is the iSlide. And iSlide, for some animation, for some reason uses this animation. It probably was meant to have some animation, but it needs to have an animation because it has collision. So it just uses this animation, but it's invisible. So it's 3204 and 1SE, 1SES, 1EV. Okay. But it also causes you to be in the I state, so we have to also load all these. We're just gonna grab them, and they are also loaded near the iSlide object. Now we have 32.1, which is the smasher constant, which is the wooden one. So it's sum.ev 32.01 sum.ev 32.00 is going to use sum.ev because (32.0) is the regular smasher that smashes when you're near it, and that uses animation, this animation. 32.3. What is 32.3? I think that's icicle. ID 182. And it's an icicle. 32.03. Nothing. And it has the icicle animations, which is 1C, 1EV. IC2, EV, IC3, EV. That's it. 938. I think 938 is the bonus. So object 331. 938 is the object, is the bonus return object. Bonus return object basically just sets where you respawn if you die in bonus. So this is the bonus return object, and it doesn't use any animation, but near it you will respawn. So we will want to load this, and we will want to load this. And also we should have loaded this near every checkpoint, so it just spawns you nicely and doesn't have to page fault. 316 is fruit, and fruit doesn't have an animation, it has a sprite, so we don't have to load anything for it. We just type it here, so it doesn't give us this warning message next time. 939 is bonus guard, I think. Yes, it's bonus guard. Bonus guard is the object that makes you not able to go into the hall after you have finished a bonus, and it happens to use the same animation, but it's just stretched. So it uses the elevator animation. Okay, 394 is gonna be live, 03, 05 is live, and live is also sprite, so we don't have to load anything because sprites come from textures, and the texture is already loaded because it's used by the main texture. So you can see the live here and the fruit here, and this texture is always loaded, and also this other one, this is always loaded, so we don't have to put it into this list because the texture is already loaded by these animations. The crash animations and the crate animations, their models have texture references, and from those models the texture references are parsed and automatically added into the perma-loaded list. So then we have 32.2, which I don't remember what it is, ID 34. Oh, you want 34, not 340. 32.2, and it's the roller object. And roller uses two animations, so we add those. 324, ID 50 is gonna be gem. Or it's actually crystal. Gem is 325. So crystal is already loaded permanently because it's in the pause menu. So we will just be keeping this empty. 18 will be another warp gate near the end. So it's this gate, so we will be just copying this and making it 8. 417. 417, ID 59. It is the box counter. Box counter is the object at the end that shows you how many crates you have out of total, and it also gives you a gem. But the box counter uses an animation that is used by the HUD, which is perma-loaded, and it uses, if it spawns a gem, the gem is already perma-loaded, the gem animation, because the gems show in the pause menu, so that's also perma-loaded. So we don't have to load anything new around this. Then there's object 11, which is warp out. ID 60, object warp out. And we'll be loading Crash's warp animation, and this is the spawning animation. I think that's only necessary in spawn. And we'll also be loading this one, a large one, and this one. So that's it's 11. 3424 is the nitro boom, nitro detonator. 3404, it is this one, box action nitro, not 04, 24, and it uses these green action create animations, so it's BA10, BA20, and also it should load in the iron crate, but I think I added the iron crate into the... Yes, the iron crate is already permaloaded. It's actually not necessary to permaload it. We can just load it, the animation where we need it. So this is Nitro Boom 14.8 is blank, I think. ID 75 14.8. What's platform gem? Oh, so it's the gem platform that takes you into the secret route, and that uses this animation PL50 and this animation PL60. One is used when the gem is there and it gets colored, and one is used when the gem is not there and it also gets colored. PL50V, PL60V. Also, I just realized the smashers, these two, when you get smashed, it also should load crash smashed animation, crash def smashed. These two animations, crash def smashed, crash def smashed, but the other one, because otherwise it would lag on that def. Now I remember these, but you will be able to figure these out, all these things that you forgot, using the debug emulator telling you which chunk it had to load because the things weren't loaded. ID 85 is the box spring, the wooden one, and the wooden box spring is this BS10V 34.5 ID 142 34.5 box iron, which is BI10V 34.23. So it's 146. Is box steel? It is the reinforced crate. So 34.23, and it is BS10V. Then there's 34.7, which is the action crate. 157. It'll tell you it is the action crate. It is this crate, and that crate uses these animations. BA10V, BA20V, and after you activated it, it is the iron crate animation. 34.8, 172. That should be the live animation, and oh, it's not ID 172. It's got 117.2 in the name for some reason. Oh, box live. So box live, we already permaload the animation, but we can just add it here in case we change our mind with permaloading the animation. 14.6, 4.27 should be the plank animation. 14.6. I don't know why they have these random numbers in their names, because it was not ID for 27. So it is the plank, and the plank uses this animation PL2EV. And then there's 9.31, which is the bonus elevator. 4.46, and elevator bonus, which is L drive. So we should have made the entire dependency list. I have made some typos. We'll restart this because we have changed the file, but it already loaded the file. So we will do rebuild ID 11, no secondary save, remake load lists, 5th on the regular spawn, perma-loaded entries, give it the perma list, dependency, we give it the dependency list, collision list, we give it the collision list, music entry, we don't use that, and we have made no typos, which is cool, but I want to show what happens when you make a typo. So for example, let's say I just made a typo here, and I made a typo here. And the program warns you in this case, so you don't have to go and look for what typo you made. ID 11. So you notice that I'm typing all of this a lot, and at the end I'll show you how to avoid typing all this every single time. After we have successfully rebuilt the level, I'll show you how to create a file that you just copy all these into, and when you want to rebuild, you just copy paste it into the program. No secondary save, yes, remake load lists, 5th spawn 1, perma list, dependency list, collision list, no music. Now it told you that invalid perma-loaded entry, it won't proceed, and unknown entry reference in object dependency list. So if you have an invalid perma-loaded entry file, it just doesn't let you go through because that's just how I made it, and you now know what you made the typo in, and go fix it. And now we can continue. So now there are some arguments that are related to how the load lists are generated. So it is not static how much in advance things are loaded. So the way it is done is it loads things a specific camera distance in advance. So let's say on this point, or in this point, here where I have cursor, the penguin path becomes drawn. So it has to be loaded a certain point in advance. So when it's here, it loads it 7,000 points in advance, camera points. And the numbers are sort of arbitrary, and you will be tweaking them so that your level doesn't lag, but also it doesn't build with too much payload, because if it loads with too much payload, it just won't work. So I will be using 8,000, and there are 3 arguments for this: SLST, neighbor, and rowless distance, and I have just kept them separate. SLST distance is how much in advance scenery rendering data is loaded, and neighbor distance is how much in advance neighbor stuff like neighboring zones and sceneries are loaded, and draw list is how much in advance things related to draw list are loaded. So you don't really need to understand how they work. You just sort of set the numbers, and if they don't work, you make them lower or higher. You should probably start at around 7,000 or 8,000. Transition preloading. So there are cases where the segments are connected using a transition, and in some cases it is not possible to load everything in advance because the level is just too big or too complicated. And so I have made it an option to decide what you want to load in advance in those cases. So when I say transition preloading none, it will lag when you change segments. When you go from one segment to another, it will not have things loaded in advance, and it will load on the transition. And that is beneficial in some of the levels that we have been making, and also I used it when I tested this tool when I was rebuilding some of the vanilla levels. Otherwise they just wouldn't really build nicely. So, but as default, you should probably use all, and it will not be an issue. And if it is an issue, you can just load only textures in advance. And if there are texture issues, loading stuff in advance leads to texture issues. You can just load the normal chunks in advance and not textures. But for now, I will just preloading everything. Backwards loading penalty is an argument that might not work correctly because it is sort of a desperate argument. So if you don't really have to touch it, don't touch it, you just make it 0. And it's telling you which load list it's been making. And you can see in zone OJH2, OJHZ, which is this zone, it's trying to load 9 textures, which it shouldn't be doing because it can only load 8 textures. So that is an issue, and you don't want to have that happen. So the solution here would be probably to just load the normal chunk entries only, which I will do the next one. Now it's asking you whether you want to omit normal chunk entries that are never loaded. You should probably just include them. We have this as an option because in custom levels you sometimes have stuff that you just edit and then you don't use it. For example, animations, models, those are mostly it. And if they are never loaded, it's easier to just not put it in the new level, but it's also dangerous because in case you forgot to load it, but it is actually used, the game will just crash. So you only use this if you really want to make your level smaller in size, which isn't very important, and when you're sure that the entries that aren't loaded are definitely not loaded, not that you just forgot. So we will not be omitting anything. Max payload limit. As you see, it is usually 21 or 20. For Crash 2, the default is 21. And if you're not sure for a level, you can launch the level in PCSX, and at the beginning there's this debug print by the game, and the game itself prints out into the console how many normal chunks it has allocated for the level. So in this case it's 21, but 21 is the maximum that it can load. Most of the time you want to make it so it is 1 less than that because it's safer. On 21 it could lag a bit because it just didn't have time to load one thing or something like that. So you want to go for one less. This number is the minimum. You have to have this, otherwise it will likely crash. But you want to have one less, and ideally you have two less. So I will be having max payload limit 19 instead of 20 or 21. Max iteration count. Now, as I said, this merge method, the merge method is basically the program trying to put entries into chunks. And since it's a bit random, and it's not sure whether it gives you good enough solution ever, or in a specific amount of iterations, you can just make it stop after trying 500. So I'll be setting it to 500. Randomness multiplier, just make this 1.5. I have never tried a different one. Seed, you also make seed 0. 0 makes it random. Thread count, this is the multi-threaded version of the merge, and I'll just having it 16. It's starting the threads, and it has rebuilt. It took a long time because I was talking, and now the level should be rebuilt, and it will be rebuilt as 11. You can see it's significant. It's smaller because it just happened to build the level smaller. And when you launch it, you notice that it has a different structure than the one before. Now I have many things open in this, so I will make it a bit more closed. But you can see that it has normal chunks, and then it has some sound chunks, then normal chunks again, then texture chunks, and then normal chunks again, and at the end it has the waveband chunks. And the rebuilder, the way I just coded it, happens that it puts texture chunks first, then it has waveband chunks, then it has sound chunks, and then it has normal chunks. So this is the rebuilt one. It has the correct ID, it shows a Snowbiz. And when we go there now, it's not lagging, it's just running slowly because my PC doesn't like the amount of stuff I'm giving it. But you can see that it didn't lag ever so far, and it's just running nicely. Now, when we were building, there was the texture issue, and there might be a consequence for it, but it doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to be running okay. So as you can see, it didn't lag when we went onto ice or on the slide because we have the stuff loaded, or when we went onto ice before it was loaded. We have loaded this def animation near the smasher. This is also the ice slide, I think. When we fall, we have perma-loaded the def animation, and we have loaded on checkpoints the respawn. This is also perma-loaded. So as you notice, I typed a lot of stuff into the console, and that is a bit annoying. So when I'm already sure that the way I rebuild it and all the arguments are correct, I can create sort of a copy-paste file. We'll call it rebuild arcs. And at the beginning, if I type help here, you can notice there's a wipe command, and the wipe command wipes the screen, so it just clears the standard output. So we usually want to do that, so because when you rebuild, you don't really want to look at the previous rebuild. You just wipe the screen, and then you want to rebuild. Then you have this path. which you copy in. You have the ID 11. You have basically all the input lines that you had. You just copy them into this file one by one. 5 first spawn, permalist, dependency list, collision list. This is empty. See, this is the previous one. This isn't even the one that I used. It was the one that had an error. So I have to scroll down. If I had wipe after that, I wouldn't have to look at that. So it was rebuilt, input path, output ID. No, I want a secondary save folder. Yes, remake, merge 5, spawn 1, all the paths. No music entry. All the distances are 8,000. Now we had transition preloaded all, but we will change it to just normal chunk entries so that it doesn't give us the texture error, because that texture error could make it, when the game is trying to load 9 texture chunks, it is not correct, and it can bug out, and it can corrupt one of those texture pages, basically. So you never want to load more than 8 texture pages. We want no backwards loading penalty. Now this was just prints. It didn't ask us anything. We don't want to omit. We want max payload limit 19. We want 500 iterations. We want random multiplier 1.5. We want seed 0, so it's random every time. We want, let's say, 8 threads. And these are the rebuild arguments. So I can delete this rebuild file so that you can see that it's not there, and I can close this. Export. It didn't close. Okay, now it did go away. So we have copied all the input lines used by the script or by the program into this file, and we can just copy paste it into it, and it will work if we did it correctly. So you don't have to type those things again. You will just have them in this one file, and all these input files you have already saved. So every time you make a change to the original level, let's say we want to have, I don't know, I'm looking for something that will make the game lag. Porcupine, Nitro, Smasher. No, the plank or the gem platform. Platform gem. We'll write that down. 14.8.04 64.0 04 0, and this will be the gem ID 58. So we go into 0D, just duplicate an object, and we add a new platform just so it lags. 14.8 4 64 4058 plat gem. So we are now in the 13 file, in the working copy one. This is the file that we make all the changes in, and then we rebuild the 11 file, the rebuilt one. So this is the one we don't patch load lists, and as you notice, as I came closer, it had to load this animation, but if I rebuild the 11 file, I just copy pasted in a clipboard because I still had it in clipboard. It saved 11. So we open the rebuild 11. And okay, frame rate isn't good, but if you pay attention to this, you will notice there are no new chunk loads and no lags, because the input files make it so when the level is rebuilt, it automatically loads this objects stuff around it. Now I want to explain what these numbers here mean. This is basically just top 8 or 9, I think, no, 8, top 8 worst zones. So that means the highest payload zone is 20, then it's 19, then it's 19, then it's 19. And these zones, this just lets you know in which area it's loading the most stuff. Let's say we just want to make it build with 17 for no reason. Let's say just that's how much it has to be. And as it's rebuilding, it's gonna print out all the iterations and how they are doing and how they did. And in here it will print which zone is the worst. So you can sort of figure out which area of the level is troublesome with the payload and where it's loading too many things, and you can maybe do something about it. And it also prints the best iteration so that you know that how it's like how the rebuilder has done the best so far. But as you can see, it built with payload 17, which is insanely good because this level isn't very complicated. So this is the old one. We just close it because that was the one before, and we have to open it anew, and this is the new one. Also, there's another script in this program that I use a lot, and some other people use it, that lets you check whether there's anything wrong with your file. So, for example, there are some things that you will be changing manually anyway. And let's say you are doing draw lists. So when you do draw lists, you can make a typo, or you just make a mistake because you're just typing a bunch of numbers. Let's say you just forgot to draw 15 here. And let's say that you were adding things and you forgot to fix this because you had it, I don't know, deprocessed or something like that. And also, let's say this camera has a typo in this. So there's this level analyze tool that prints a bunch of stats about the file. And I'm gonna from the top. Here it just prints which IDs are used and where. That can be useful, so you can keep track of which IDs you have left when you're modding and whether you haven't accidentally used the same ID twice without wanting to do it. So this just lets you know which ID is used. Then it just prints this list of how many entities are used with each type and subtype. which is just for statistics. For example, this level has 244 fruits right now, and it has 48 empty crates, and it has 14 TNTs, and it has 12 nitros. Then there's some more stats. It has 496 entities. It has 474 entries, which entries are just zones and models and stuff like that. It has 125 crates. Does this level have 125 crates? It treats one more objects as breakable for some reason. Oh, because we added a nitro. Yeah, we added a nitro, so the real box count is 125, and there's 12 nitros, and average normal chunk portion taken is how much space in normal chunks is used by stuff and how much isn't. So 88% means there's like 11% left on average in normal chunks unused, which isn't very necessary to know if you're rebuilding the level, because you don't care about this level structure if you don't want to like playtest it for some reason. You only care about the rebuild one structure. Okay, here's the payload info. It tells you how many things are loaded, how many normal chunks are loaded, how many textures are loaded, and how many entities are drawn at the most. So we can see that in this area there's a lot of entities drawn. See, there's 53 at some points being drawn. Then there's ghoul type list, which tells you which ghoul is which type, so you don't have to look at NSD. Then there are potentially unused ghoul entries. Unused ghoul entries only depend on entities, so if there's some object that isn't spawned by an entity, for example the doctor object which follows you, or your shadow, or some other thing shadow, those aren't entities, those are spawned by other stuff, they will show here, and as you can see they could still be used by other means. Animations not referenced, there are models not referenced in case you have something left over. There are texture references that are not used. These animations, these textures aren't used by any scenery in this level because these are animations used by the warp room, and we just don't load them in this level because I don't really care about making the game load between levels a bit faster. Here's one thing: zones reference check. You can see that in zone OD, in its chem path, we reference an incorrect SLST, which isn't there, and this SLST isn't used. So that is one thing that we have made an issue or a typo in, and we can fix it. Then we see that here some zones are drawing object or entity tied to other objects and other zones entity which doesn't exist, and we can see that OD isn't drawing something, or it's undrawing before it's drawing. So we can just go and make sure that it isn't incorrect, and from this we can deduce that 500 we can look at ODHZ, and we notice that it's trying to draw 507 and it says the entity doesn't exist. So we just look at this and we can correct it. And if we look at it again, we have corrected all of those and they won't show again. So I made those mistakes on purpose so I could show it, but you'll just make those mistakes because people make mistakes, and with this tool, with this level analyze thingy, you'll be able to fix those. So to sum it up, I set up a level for rebuilding. Rebuilding is used to recreate load lists and level structure automatically by a tool without your direct inclusion, because it's annoying. And for that we will need an input file, which is the level itself, which we can either rename to some other ID or to something completely else. Like this could be called just working copy, and we would never open this file again. But if we want to, for some reason, play this level, the dirty version, we can keep it with some ID. Then we use the program, and we have to feed it some inputs. There has to be a list of things that are always loaded, which is in one file. Then there's a list which tells the game what to load near specific objects. So there are just animations, because models or textures are parsed from the animation and from the model, and GUL is parsed from the type. And then we can have collision list, with which we can tie specific animation to specific collision type. And when we have all those, we can type all these in, and when we sort of have some configuration that works, or something that we want to like try every time, we can just save all the lines of the input for the rebuild into a file, and when we want to rebuild, we just copy paste and paste it into the program, and it will rebuild. And if you want to change the parameters, for example, we don't need to build with max 17. We can just build with max 19. Or if you don't want to have it multi-threaded, we just change the method to 4, and we don't need threads anymore. And let's say we want to load a bit more in advance, we just change the distances, and we just have it in a file that we don't have to remember all these arguments anymore. We can just type them in. So as I said, there was this iteration limit, which we set to 500. Okay, never mind. So there's this iteration limit that should come into play now, because it won't be able to load the level as well as we want it in those 100 iterations, so it will just stop after the 100. This is the slow version, the version that doesn't have threads. So we made the max payload limit 16, and as you can see, it's building with 23 to 17 or 18 at the best. So far the best it found was max 18 and then some 17s. So it's still trying, and after 100 iterations it will just stop, because you don't want to have this running forever. And also the use of this could be that you just have it run for a lot of iterations and you keep the best one at the end, because it gives you the best one at the end. Like, it didn't find 16, but it found 18 best, so it saved that 18 best. So I'll probably put all of these into a folder and have it on Mediafire, so you can have a look at it. And also, when you go to my GitHub, there where I was testing this on Vanilla Crash 2, so I had to make these permalists and dependency lists. So this is a subtype list for Vanilla Crash 2 for all the objects, or the way I rebuild it, and then there are perma-loaded lists for all the files. So for example, 11, you can see there's this, and you can see I perma-loaded pretty much the same stuff. 926 is BD10V. Okay, so I didn't perma-load something, or I just made one different choice. But you can probably just grab the perma list from here, or you can just look at this and see the syntax for the files, and from this thingy's releases you will be able to grab the program that is used. So I also should say that this is pretty advanced, and we have started using it only recently. There are some levels in the modpack don't use it yet and won't use it ever. For example, you can see there's no rebuild, but it doesn't work. And there are also other files, other levels that don't even try to use it. So it is complicated, but it is handy. And if you want to make complicated levels and don't want to touch load lists and don't want to move entries between chunks all the time, it is very useful for this. For example, this level, which I can't show, wouldn't even build without it, I think. There were many issues, and currently Bugged Out uses it, No Pressure uses it, some Erumus and Hermanis levels use it. So I don't know, I guess that's it. You can just comment questions, I guess. I'm not sure whether anyone is gonna use this at all. Maybe like someone advanced, and they will probably just DM me on Discord. So if you know me and you want to use this, just DM me on Discord, but watch this video first. If you made it this far, you probably did. So I will put the stuff into description of the video, I guess. I'm just gonna change this to something normal, to 19 or to 20 and to 500. And that's it. How long is this? Holy fuck. Okay, no one's gonna watch this for sure.